Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us in our first official webinar organized for our forum. The topic of this webinar will be the role of STEAM in early education, specifically on regarding how we can attract more girls in this topic from early stages. For this purpose, today we have two speakers that are going to present two different perspectives on this topic, but complementary perspectives, because we have Paula with us, who is joining from Ireland, right? And she's going to present how what can we do to have more impact in early stages within the education system to attract more girls in STEAM. While Anastasia, who is joining from Cyprus, is going to shift a little bit perspective and show us what we can do to have more impact outside the education system, which is something as important as the education system is. So I'm going to let them better to introduce themselves. I think we can start with Paula because she's going to present findings from her research in this topic. Thank you very much.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm just going to share my slides here before I get started. Okay, so you should be able to see them now. So good morning, and I'm delighted to be here presenting to you on this topic that I'm so passionate about. So what I'm going to present to you is called STEAM from the Start, which is the title of my research. And the subtitle is Proposing a Conceptual Framework for the Development and Implementation of a STEAM Training Intervention for Early Childhood Educators. So just a little bit about me first. So as Christina said, my name is Paula Walshe, and I'm currently a lecturer in early childhood education on the Bachelor of Education degree programme at the South East Technological University in Carlow in Ireland. For those of you who don't know where Carlow in Ireland is, it's that little red county there on the map of Ireland. But I'm also just about to submit my PhD research, which is what I'm going to present to you today. I'm just about to submit that. I've been working on it for almost the last 4 years, and I've been doing that research on STEAM in early childhood education through Dundalk Institute of Technology, which is another university here in Ireland. And I'm also a member of the Women in Digital Thematic Working Group 1, encouraging ICT education. So just in terms of my research project on STEAM in early childhood education, I had three main objectives that I'm trying to look at. So I was trying to look at, well, what are the factors that are facilitating and impeding in terms of barriers to the incorporation of STEAM, being science, technology, engineering, the arts and maths in early childhood education. So we're talking about children before they start formal primary school education. I know that the age differs slightly depending on the country that you're in, but here in Ireland it's about 5 years old. So before formal primary school education starts, in that preschool, kindergarten, early childhood phase. So what's stopping or what's supporting educators to bring STEAM into their practice with children? And then the second objective was to look at educators' perceptions of STEAM. So looking at educators' knowledge and beliefs on the definition of STEAM and how important they felt STEAM to be or not to be in terms of early childhood education. And then on the basis of all of that, the third objective was to develop some kind of STEAM training intervention for early childhood educators to help them to bring STEAM into their practice with young children, and more importantly then to try and evaluate the impact of the intervention that I developed as a result of my research. So I'm not going to go through the whole literature review, but I did draw upon a couple of specific earlier studies which did already implement a STEAM training intervention in the form of CPD for early childhood educators. But the findings of those, there was a couple of particular studies, Jamil et al. 2017 and another one by Dejarnett in 2018. And what they found was that in their research that really influenced how I took forward my research was that the early childhood educators who engaged in the CPD STEAM training that they developed and provided, when they went back to them after the training, they reported that they found the training really interesting and they enjoyed it, but they did not go on to bring STEAM into their practice with young children in the classroom. So that was sort of a particular thing that I honed in on as something to work on in my research to sort of differentiate it from other research that was done in the field. Um, okay, I'm not going to go through all the literature, but so these were the two studies in particular that had delivered similar things to me in the form of a STEAM training intervention. But as I said, even though the educators, they did report that they felt their knowledge had increased or their confidence had increased. However, they didn't go on to implement what they learned and strategies they learned post training. So what had happened was that what I think somebody's yeah, oh sorry. So what had happened was that, the educated and trained, but it wasn't the STEAM still wasn't making its way into the classroom with children. So, you have to think about them. Well, what's the benefit there? There's no point in training the educators if it's not making its way to the children because so they're sort of like a gatekeeper to the classroom. So I won't go into my methodology too much, but basically what I did was I used constructivist grounded theory, which means that I didn't draw upon a theoretical framework that was already there or was already used by somebody else. There were a few different ones that that I mentioned there on the slide, because when I looked at them, at the frameworks that were already used in other similar research, either they weren't specific to early childhood education or they were only looking at technology. They weren't looking at the whole STEAM transdisciplinary approach. Or they were used in studies where the findings, like the previous studies I mentioned, they didn't have the desired impact on early childhood education. Educators hadn't implemented what they had learned. So I determined that a new approach was needed. So I used constructivist grounded theory, which means I decided that I would develop my own theory as I was going along. So I'd gather data and then I'd analyze that data and then I'd construct my own theory and then I'd test that theory. Okay, so a new approach completely. So my participants were early childhood educators in Ireland, and I had sort of two main phases of data collection. So I went out and collected surveys from educators here in Ireland who were working in early childhood education, and then I followed that up with some focus groups to try and look at, well, what's happening on the ground, those objectives in relation to what are the barriers or facilitating factors in terms of early childhood education educators either bringing or not bringing STEAM into their practice. Then, based on that, so I used a reflexive thematic analysis approach, which meant that I was interpreting the data from that phase, and then I used that along with a constructivist grounded theory approach to develop a new STEAM intervention. And then I went on to deliver that STEAM intervention around the country here in Ireland. So I delivered it in the form of a 1 day, 6 hour STEAM training workshop. That was what I developed. Out of the phase one data, I developed a conceptual framework and then I built the workshop based on the framework. And then I went out and delivered it around the country. But to try and establish, what the impact in the short, medium, and long term um, practice of the educators who attended the training, what I did was on the day of the training workshop with the educators who came for the training, I had them do a quick survey before the training about their knowledge, their skill, their confidence around STEAM, and then I had them do another workshop at the end of the day, immediately after the training, to see was there an immediate sort of impact in the short term of the training. Then I went 3 months after the training. I did some focus groups with a small cohort of 7 educators who had attended the training to see in the medium term had they still were they implementing what they'd learned in the training in their practice. And I had some very positive results that yes they were. And then the real goal was to see long term, had this training intervention that I developed based on my conceptual framework, did it have a long-term impact, or was it looking like it was going to have a long-term impact on their practice? So I went back to the same 7 focus group participants 9 months post-training, and I did a short survey with them and to see were they still in the sort of longer term implementing the what they had learned at the workshop in their practice, and they did seem to be doing so, which was very good. So I'm not going to go through all of this slide because we don't have time, but it's just to show that from the data collection in the first phase on the left of the slide, I did the surveys and focus groups, I analysed the data and I identified the themes, then I developed the conceptual framework based on it. I incorporated some universal design for learning principles to make the training workshop as accessible as possible for everybody. Then in data collection phase 2, I delivered or developed and delivered the training. The learning outcomes for the training itself were based in the conceptual framework and based and embedded and grounded in data collection phase 1. So just to show how the constructivist grounded theory flow, so how the end output, which was the training intervention and the learning outcomes associated with it, you can sort of trace it right back to the beginning, to the first data collection phase, just to show how the conceptual framework and the training itself was embedded within the original data which was collected. Okay, so in the phase after the first phase, when I went out and just to see, what were educators' experiences of barriers and facilitating factors to STEAM in their practice, and did they think STEAM was important or not? The themes that I identified, there was 6 of them. So, and just very briefly, what was they related to how important educators thought STEAM was. Could they define STEAM? Did they have misperceptions around technology and what they thought technology to be? Engaging in training or CPD on STEAM? Did they have an understanding of the intrinsic value of the arts in the STEAM approach as opposed to just STEM, where the arts isn't as focused on? And then there were some other barriers that I put into a theme by themselves because they didn't warrant a full theme, but they still were relevant. Things like management maybe who were or co-workers who were hesitant about STEAM, or finances and cost of materials and things like that. So when I went on to further reflect upon those 6 themes in phase 1, I identified that there were actually 2 main driving factors that these themes fell into. And what they were ultimately were what I found was that the 2 main factors which needed to be addressed in a training intervention going forward was not only providing educators with knowledge around what STEAM was and how to bring it into their practice, but they also needed to be willing to do so. So the 2 factors that I really needed to focus on, I felt, as a result of my analysis of the data, was that the training intervention needed to focus on supporting educators to be willing to bring STEAM into their training, as well as being able to do so. Because if the training just developed their ability, but they weren't willing to bring it in because maybe they didn't really buy into the importance of it, or maybe they really still couldn't define exactly what it was, for example, well, then they weren't going to bring it into their practice. So the willingness and ability factors were 2 really important things that I focused on in the development of the training intervention. So this is the proposed STEAM from the Start conceptual framework, which was embedded, and each part and each phase on the framework linked directly back to one of the themes that I identified on the previous slide. And as a result, meant that, the conceptual framework and any training that I developed based on it would address the willingness and ability factors because it was addressing each of the themes. So the parts or the phases of the conceptual framework were that I needed to develop training which would establish the importance of STEAM for educators, which would define what STEAM was clearly, and also define the educator's role in facilitating STEAM, which would delineate misperceptions around technology. So to delineate technology beyond just the digital screen. So to start bringing in an understanding of unplugged technology or digital technologies that didn't necessarily need screens. To build on educators' previous knowledge and training, either around STEAM or just their initial educator training. And then to situate the reciprocal role of the arts, because if I didn't situate the arts within STEAM, well, then we were only talking about STEM and not STEAM, but also to situate STEAM within the early childhood education curriculum, so that the educators could see where it fit, where it sat, and the potential for it in their curriculum. And then the last phase was access, to support access to STEAM by identifying and addressing barriers. So a big focus I had in my workshop was on accessible and affordable STEAM. So not saying to educators, well, to bring STEAM in, you need to spend €2,000 on a really expensive robotics kit. So I really focused on educators being able to facilitate STEAM with resources and materials, first and foremost, that were within their own setting or were, excuse me, or were very affordable and easily accessible. And then they could build from that platform into more advanced or expensive equipment if they wanted to. But nevertheless, even if they didn't want to or didn't have the means to do so, that wasn't going to be a barrier because they could see how to bring STEAM into their practice with what they already had. So I developed the STEAM training intervention then based upon that framework. And it was important then through my analysis that there were two parts to it. So the first part was sort of a theoretical part, the why STEAM is important, what STEAM is. And the second part of the workshop and the second half of the day was a real practical, experiential, hands-on part of the workshop where I brought materials and resources again that were affordable, accessible, familiar to, from my own experience as I previously managed and an early childhood setting, and I was an early childhood educator. So for my own experience, I had an understanding of what kinds of materials and resources might an early childhood educator have typically in their setting. So I was able to bring resources that were familiar, affordable, accessible, and I designed STEAM training, or I designed STEAM activities around those resources. So educators could have the theoretical understanding first and then put that into practical application so that they could see the importance of STEAM and also how they could immediately bring it into their practice after the training. So a very quick summary of my findings. So the short-term impact, so with those pre and post training surveys on the day of the workshop. So they did show an increased confidence, a clearer understanding of STEAM, an increased belief in the importance of STEAM, and a reduction in perceived barriers straight away. Now, I didn't include percentages and numbers here because we just didn't have time, but if anybody wants to, I can forward them on information. But it did show very positive impact in the very short term, straight away at the end of the day of the training. So the medium term impact, so 2 months post the training, when I went back and did the work, did the focus groups with a smaller cohort. So what that showed me was that there was an intentional incorporation of STEAM happening in in the practice of the focus group participants, and they felt more confident to incorporate STEAM, and they were intentionally incorporating it and they associated that directly with their as a result of their engagement in the workshop 2 months previous. So the medium term impact on practice was positive. And then in terms of trying to establish the longer term impact, so when I went back to those same 7 participants 9 months post training through surveys, it did show a sustained engagement in STEAM in their practice. Now, what I did also provide to them was follow up resources. So they got a training booklet, which I developed. They received that on the day of the training. And then I sent them 3 monthly, consecutive monthly newsletters with some new ideas and reinforcing the learning that they had at the workshop, and they reported that that was really beneficial in sustaining their long-term impact at the 9 month mark, in sustaining in sustaining them to continue to bring STEAM into their practice in that longer term. So just in conclusion of my research, so the development and delivery of effective STEAM interventions really need to address both that willingness as well as the ability of educators. There's no point in increasing their ability if they're not willing then when they go back to their practice to bring it into their practice with children. Also, training needs to address challenges from that prior training models highlighted regarding the importance of grounding training interventions in educators' lived experience relevant to a topic, which is what I tried to do by using grounded theory and developing a new conceptual framework and a new approach, and by grounding it in the experiences of the educators in the first phase of my research. And also, this would increase the potential for meaningful and sustained impact of a training intervention on STEAM on the long term and in pedagogical practice. So they were the sort of main conclusions that I drew from the research. Um, Obviously, there were some recommendations because the pool of participants were limited to Ireland, but and some recommendations that I make is, perhaps some longitudinal research on the impact of the framework on children's STEAM engagement and the impact on gender disparity in STEM subject areas, and then to maybe test the adaptability of the framework relative to other emerging areas of pedagogy where there is sort of hesitancy and maybe barriers and lack of understanding among EC early childhood educators, um, and where we might again need to address their willingness and ability to incorporate a new approach, maybe like artificial intelligence or augmented reality, for example. Um, so how does this link to the Women in Digital Declaration? Well, by targeting that leaky STEM pipeline and those pathways, by taking an early interventionist approach across the entire educational continuum or lifespan. At the moment, the pathways and that graph of the pathway and the pipeline that we're used to seeing, starts in primary. So what I'm proposing is that we need to start earlier in pre-primary to which also links into things like the EU Commission's basic skills, digital competence being a basic skill, and the STEM education strategy in the EU to focus on STEM in the early years. And also to empower educators to promote early and sustained STEM engagement, which is something that we spoke about in the terms of the Women in Digital Declaration. So in terms of empowering them to um, to bring their STEAM into their practice and ICT and digital into their practice, and to support the post-training implementation in early childhood practice, to provide training and support materials grounded in educators' training, pre-existing knowledge and lived experience, so making it relevant to support that sustained implementation. Also, to make it universally adaptable. So the training that I developed and the conceptual framework I developed, even though I developed it in Ireland and even though I tested it in Ireland, I didn't make it specific to the Irish early childhood curriculum, which means that it's adaptable universally across any early childhood curriculum approach. And also, it can provide information on how to incorporate STEM meaningfully into an early childhood classroom in terms of materials and resources in an age appropriate way. Um, how am I doing for time, Christina?
You're good.
Okay. So just in terms of a few interesting things that came out of the research, that what's something that came out was that there is a fear of ICT and technology among early childhood educators. And when I engaged with them in the first phase of the research, what came out was that, their understanding of technology straight away was they had a synonymous association between the word technology with smartphones, digital screens, laptops, and tablets. And what they were reporting back to me in focus groups was that, oh no, we don't want to bring that into early childhood education because they deemed that the early childhood classroom was sort of a safe space where children's lives weren't being bombarded by digital screens. So, but because they had this synonymous association, even with the words STEAM and STEM, not even just technology, they immediately, when I asked them about STEAM, was that they spoke about technology and they spoke about a concern around screen time. So breaking down what STEAM is and STEM is important, but also delineating that idea that technology doesn't need to be digital screens and screen time. That they can be digital tools like a digital weighing scales or a digital um, thermometer, for example, or it can be unplugged resources that support the development of computational thinking and digital competence so that they didn't need to have this fear of screen time. So breaking that down was really important. And I think that could be something that is going to be important, in terms of this of our work as well. Um, but what I presented to them was this quote by Sharpan in 2012, who said, technology is just a fancy word for tools. So as adults, we can tend to think of technology as digital equipment, but crayons and pencils are tools, so are rulers and magnifying glasses, scissors, zippers, and dump trucks. So we can intentionally incorporate technology that is beyond just digital screen-based devices, as I call them. But it's what we do with them and it's the intention behind them. So we can bring in unplugged tools with an intention to promote digital competence or computational thinking or problem solving or analytical skills, which are very important for digital competence. We can bring that into an early childhood setting without the use of digital technological tools. So that's important. And once what the educators reported back to me in the research was once they started to think about technology beyond that, beyond, as I said to them, the word technology wasn't just invented when the internet was invented. A technology is just an innovation that humans invented to make something else easier to do. Yes, digital technology is a part of technology, but once I broke that down, I found that their barriers around technology and their openness to technology increased. And I think that's really important because if we can open that door to non-digital technologies or non-screen based digital technologies, well, then that's going to increase the educator's confidence. And then we can build upon that. So then they may then be more open to the screen based technologies if and when they deem that to be appropriate to their practice. So technology not just being digital screens, so it can be digital or non-digital. Technology in an early childhood setting could be a light table or a light box to view resources in a different way. So for example, in the image there. Um, so, we can focus on promoting digital competence, promoting computational thinking, analytical skills, problem solving, and critical thinking, all which are part of and necessary to be digitally competent. Um, we can have technological resources that are digital or unplugged. So we can have, say here there's the microscopes and there's the magnifying glasses, which are technologies which don't need to have a screen. We can have a digital weighing scales alongside an old school analog weighing scales so that children understand the representation of, say, mathematical concepts in, a digital and a non-digital analog format, or they understand the engineering behind, um, or that something can be engineered in two different ways, the digital and the non-digital way. But we can also bring in technology and ICT and a focus on digital skills and digital equipment by bringing in old technological resources, old computers, old keyboards, and old mice, old non-working laptops, old monitors, old phones, whether they're old, sort of more like the phone in the picture there, like the office phone, maybe some older mobile phones and some old smartphones that are not working. So children can see the evolution of those technologies over time. They can role play with them. They're representing the real world. And they're promoting innovation and problem solving, digital competence, and engagement with ICT without the concern around the screen time. And, when we think about representing technology in the real world of children, children understanding things like contactless payments, so thinking about even the simplest thing in an early childhood environment, if there is like a role play shop area, are we representing technology in the real world as children experience it and the digital skills they need to be active citizens and to participate in the real world? So, how we think about money and spending money, children experience contactless payments, they're less experienced with cash. So, are we representing that? If we have a shop area, play area in the early childhood environment, do we have the contactless icon on it represented? Do we have, like, this is on the left hand side, that's actually a toy that you can buy and the screen turns on and you can tap the card and insert the card and you can insert a pin and the lights light up on the left hand side to show that the pin's accepted. That's real life children. So if we're not representing that, then, how are we representing technology in the real world? So things like that we can bring technology in and digital skills and ICT in through play and playful resources. But we can even explore digital concepts like robotics and AI in a completely non-digital way. So as I said earlier, it's the intention behind it. So with all these junk art materials here on the screen, we can explore robotics. We can ask children to design a junk art robot and create a junk art robot, and then explore a technological concept in a hands-on experiential way. We can have discussions with children, ask them lots of open-ended questions like what do robots do? What does a robot sound like? How does a robot move? If you had a robot, you know, what would you ask it to do? Do you have a robot in your house? A lot of children have a robotic vacuum cleaner. And we can also bring STEAM and digital words into our
Super.
interactions with children as well, like the robotic and program and sensor and function and all of that.
Um,
Um,
maybe 2 more minutes, and then
okay,
we jump to
I
Anastasia.
yeah,
Thank you.
I am almost, but I should be finished anyway. But even in a completely non sort of technological activity with children, like in Play-Doh, we can bring coding concepts and maths in. So let's say, for example, we print and laminate a visual recipe to make the Play-Doh. So we don't give them the pre-made Play-Doh, but if we print and laminate a visual recipe, so let's say it has a picture of 2 cups and a picture of the bag of flour and 2 cups and a picture of the bottle of oil, vegetable oil. So these are the ingredients for Play-Doh. So if we put that on the table and we set out all the ingredients, the children have to follow that code to make the Play-Doh. They have to, and they have to bring in their critical thinking and analytical and problem solving skills. Maybe it's too wet or too dry. What can we add? What can we take away? That's actually pre-coding and math skills. We could explore wind power with children by seeing how far they can blow different items, like a pom pom on a table, with either just blowing with their mouth, with a mini handheld fan, with a hair dryer. They're hypothesizing, they're testing theories. These are all supporting the development of digital competence. And that's the end. That's my references. So yeah, that's me done.
Thank you very much, Paula. I think you brought so many interesting points for discussion that I wouldn't even know from where to start. But I'm going to jump to Anastasia, being aware of the time, and then I would also like to understand if we have some questions from our participants. Otherwise, I will have lots of questions that I don't think I will be able to ask lots of them here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, just a couple of minutes to see how to share my screen. Okay, I think I'm gonna share the entire screen. Please let me know if you can see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Paula, for a very, very interesting presentation. And I think that it fits well into what I'm going to talk about today. It's a pleasure being here. My name is Anastasia Liopetriti. I'm here representing Girls in STEAM Academy as a head of community and impact and as a co-founder. So through my presentation, we're going to see a bit more in practice how we bring together this element of bridging the gap. So just to present, to say a few words about our initiative, Girls in STEAM Academy has been active since 2021. It's a non-profit initiative under the Biennale Foundation, which is a registered non-profit foundation in Cyprus. And our goal is to close the gap in the underrepresentation of women and girls in STEAM. Our work focuses on the intersection of education, digital skills, empowerment, and gender equality, translating policy priorities into practical learning experiences. And by the way, if you have any questions, you can write them in the chat and we can come back once finish also this presentation. So why do we do what we do? Okay, considering this specific meeting, I think we can all agree that we are all in the same line, but just very, very quickly, we want to challenge stereotypes that suggest girls cannot excel in STEAM fields. And we do that through various ways. Mainly, we allow the girls themselves to break the stereotypes. For us, access to opportunity is very, very important. So we want to ensure that all girls have equal access to opportunities in STEAM. And for that, we give particular importance to girls coming from rural areas, from socioeconomic challenged areas, and mainly from public schools in Cyprus. Inspiration is also very important for us because we want to inspire and motivate girls to follow their passion, showing them that the possibilities are endless in STEM, in STEAM. And lastly, community support. We want to create a supportive community where women and girls can share experiences and grow together. And also, we do acknowledge the fact that a single organization or a single individual cannot bring about a deep impact. It needs a synergy of like-minded individuals and organizations that share similar objectives. And here I just included 2 slides with snapshots from our activities from the past 5 years, just to get a visual understanding of how we involve young girls in our activities. And now I'm going to talk about a bit about our methodology, which was tested, which was piloted, and it turned out to be successful. So our flagship program is called Bridge STEAM. Bridge STEAM, what is it? Basically, it is a 2 days intensive program. It takes place during the weekend. It's free of charge for girls, going back to the opportunity and the access that we said. And it targets girls aged 14 to 16 because it is a critical period for them to make some decisions about choosing some subjects in schools that will define their university studies. Maybe it's the same in other countries, but in Cyprus, when you are 14, 15, you need to choose the subjects that will define these options later on. But also, and most importantly, it is the first stage of the leaky pipeline where we observe that girls may have are good in the subjects, but they do not continue to choose any STEM disciplines. It is a program based heavily on non-formal education, precisely because we want to move from the standard school, let's say, formal structure. And the main components are the coding workshops that we implement hands-on coding workshops, where at the end of the second day, at the end of the program, each girl develops her own personalized website from zero. We address the sustainable development goals because we believe that sustainability goes hand in hand with STEAM and innovation. So we do that by implementing real-world problem-solving activities through the SDG education. Very, very importantly, we also incorporate a career guidance workshop from a certified career trainer. And again, this is very important because a lot of times there is a lot of misinformation and disinformation and misinformation about the possible careers that one can have after school. And this workshop has proven beneficial in giving the general approach to girls that what they choose as their first study does not define their whole career, right? And we also have discussions, informative talks with female role models in STEAM, and I'm going to come back to that in a bit. And last but not least, we have a more intimate, safe discussion around the SDG 5, which is gender equality. And for us, this is, we have noticed that this particular discussion, which it's not directly linked to STEAM, gives the floor and gives them the opportunity to girls to express their own concerns regarding any gender equality issues. And it is within this discussion that sometimes we get some anecdotes about their own personal experiences of, for example, sexism or how they perceive stereotypes in their own environment, for example, in school, especially, or in their families. So the focus of Bridge STEAM is not only the development of skills, but also we focus on identity, confidence, confidence building, and belonging. So some key lessons after 5 years of implementing these programs and involving more than 300 girls is that the main barriers are definitely not academic, but they are psychological and social. I was doing a research for another presentation recently, and I was looking at the Women in Digital Index 2024, and for Cyprus, the statistics were that girls outperform boys academically in STEM subjects by a lot. However, they still do not choose STEAM pathways, and I think this is a very important indication, an insight that reflects directly on the reference that the main barriers are not academic. So what is the real issue? It is belonging, confidence, and perception. So from our experience again, some key barriers that we identified is the lack of visibility of female role models. And I say the lack of visibility, not lack of female role models, because there are role models, but I think it's very important to give them the visibility. And it's something that I think Women in Digital does very well through all your initiatives. The gender stereotypes, of course, that are expressed in the school, the family, and the media in general. The low self-efficacy, which leads to a confidence gap in girls. The stereotypical career images that are linked with the gender stereotypes mentioned above. The fear of failure. We observe that girls are more risk adverse. So we are raised in a way that we need to be perfect. We need to do everything perfect. But in order to do everything perfect, we tend not to take risks and not to experiment. And this fear of failure holds the girls back. And the poor understanding of STEAM careers, which is also, important in this whole puzzle. But now let's be a bit more optimistic, let's say, what works best for us and some very practical examples that I hope that will support and help educators and other people listening to us today. The direct contact with women role models is of uttermost importance. During the bridging programs, we dedicate like 2 to 4 slots, let's say, half-hour slots, so that women role models in STEAM can talk about their journey, can tell to the girls what they're actually doing, like day to day, what they studied in order to be in the position they are today. And we notice that when these women are authentic and they are honest about their journey, including their failures, it is much more impactful for the girls because they understand that you can succeed in life even if you have some failures, and these failures can actually help you learn some things. What does not work for us is to have like a lecture style, this one-way presentation, because the girls get bored very easily. So it's more effective if they are more interactive, if they have, for example, humor embedded in their presentations. And the impact we have observed is very, very positive. We can see the girls have an immediate change in their career perception. For example, and I put this photograph of one of the women role models we had last year in one of our programs. She's a paleontologist. And when she came into the classroom, the first question she asked the girls was, do you know what paleontology is? And, most of the girls said, Ross from Friends. That you need to know history and ancient Greek and something very theoretical to study paleontology. And actually, what she told them was that the main element of paleontology is chemistry, because you need to study, for example, the ground, the stones, and so on and so forth. So they immediately dismantle some misbelief that they had for this occupation. And she actually brought like findings from her excavations that she did. She brought like a dinosaur tooth. She brought like a stone from millions of years ago, and she allowed the girls to observe them, and they were actually very, very, very interested to see some actual things from her work. So we noticed this curiosity to speak with the role models and ask more things, and sometimes they wouldn't let them leave because they had a lot of questions to ask them, and also asking about the university pathways the same way. What did you study to be a paleontologist, or what did you study to be, for example, a biostatistician? So we see this this curiosity after this contact with women role models. The second thing I'm going to mention is the hands-on learning instead of the theoretical learning. So from our experience, we see that the girls are more active when they are building something, when they are designing and solving real problems, instead of being lectured or assessed or graded. And the best performing activities from our program is, sorry, do I have the time?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Is when they build their own website, personalized website, when they explore the SDGs through real-world examples, and when they have open discussions, and when they are encouraged to experiment, even if they fail at first. And last but not least, for us, it's very important to keep these girls engaged. So we now have a network of 300 girls, more or less, that have graduated from this two-day program. But we know for a fact that there is also from studies that there is a very high dropout rate from women dropping out from STEM disciplines and studies. So it's very important to keep them engaged, so that it's not just a once-off program, but they get to be engaged throughout the whole year. Through constant support and community building. So, for example, we have several different activities for them to participate in, always free, of course. We have the She Speaks podcast. We have our own podcast where the presenters are always young girls from our programs. And the podcast gives them the opportunity to develop agency, to develop and practice their presentation skills and networking. We also have the summer job shadowing program in tech companies that gives them the opportunity to see how the jobs are, the STEAM jobs are in the real labor market. Also opportunities for trainings abroad. We share these opportunities whenever there are. And lastly, we engage them as volunteers in our in different events that we participate in. I'm not gonna say a lot about this slide. It's just a snapshot of the impact and the key partners that we have managed to establish up until today. I just want to share only the statistic that is on the left-hand side that I think it's very important for us, that around 93% of participants stated that they are very likely to pursue a career or further education in a stimulated field after participating in the program. And I think this is very important because they get to see the opportunities that there are and then decide where they want to do it or not. Closing, just a very brief reference to our team. We're a very small team of 2.5 people because Anita is a volunteer. So we try to make our activities as efficient as possible. And I want to close by saying that we have observed through 5 years of these programs that when the girls are given agency and a platform, when they get to interact and meet with women in these professions and see that they themselves can also imagine themselves in those positions, and when they have a clear understanding of the career options and everything in a safe and non-judgmental environment, then we can see that their perceptions change. And our goal is not, of course, to make all the girls follow STEAM disciplines, of course, but it's to give this opportunity so that they can choose it if they want. So that's all for me. I hope that I wasn't very...
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I look forward to any questions if there are.
Thank you very much, Anastasia. It's amazing what you can achieve with 2.5 people. If we have any question, don't hesitate to open your microphone and let us know. Otherwise, as I also posted, you can also use our Q&A section. For me, the main key takeaway from both your presentations, I think it will be that the issue out there is not that girls and women lack hard skills. It's not that we are not good at math or science. It's about psychological confidence. It's about safe environments, and it's about tackling stereotypes and building confidence in young girls. I think we have a question.
Hi, Nan. This is Fahad from the OECD. I have a question actually for Paula, if that's okay. Great. Thank you, though, for both speakers because both presentations were excellent. And Paula, your research is super amazing and very valuable, and I hope it continues and flows, like into the whole curriculum. My question is about what do you see are the factors that support the medium longer term impacts that you see? Because I guess I'm coming from a more economics background, so I don't know if this is the case, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm imagining that these educators, I guess, had to agree to participate. So I'm wondering if they are, maybe the more progressive ones, or they're already trying new things, or they're already more into STEAM, to STEM, or they have more time as well. So is it having more time? And also the other question is whether individual educators have a lot of control and choice over the curriculum and what they can implement. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, I suppose that was the whole point that I decided that, when I was, looking into other approaches that had been taken in terms of supporting educators to bring STEAM into early childhood practice, and the issues that they had faced in terms of post-training implementation, and the lack of post-training implementation, even though the educators were saying we're interested and we enjoyed learning about this stuff, but they weren't translating it into their pedagogical practice. So I think that acknowledgement that at the early childhood stage, and as with all education, all teachers, that the educator is a gatekeeper to the classroom. So if we don't get the educator on board, then it's never going to make its way into the any approach is never going to make its way into the children in a classroom environment. So I think there are, what I found was that there were a lot of perceived barriers, like maybe time or money, but that the biggest things were that educators, was their confidence, to do it, and feeling like it was understanding the relevance and understanding how it applied and how it could be incorporated into their own curriculum. So as a result of that, and I suppose one of the wonderful things about being able to use a constructivist grounded theory and starting from scratch as opposed to trying to apply a previously developed theoretical framework, was that I was able to develop something novel that was specifically grounded in what educators were telling me. And yes, obviously the educators, they decided to partake. Um, but I think the fact that what was coming out of my research was that the training intervention needed to focus on um, accessibility, so that the barriers, kind of, whether they were ones that I was already aware of through my research or ones that maybe would come up later afterwards, that the training would support educators to break down those barriers nearly themselves. So having affordable and accessible materials and showing them sort of how STEAM may even be already present in their practice without them realizing it. And that was something interesting that came up with the educators. Um, that they were saying to me, like, God, we see that we're already doing STEAM to a certain extent, and we didn't even realize it before. So, paring it back to the basics and then using that as a platform to build upon, um, and that they could make it relevant to their own curriculum. So which is why I didn't make it specifically and build it around the Irish approach, so that it could be applied. So I don't know whether I've answered your question. I hope I have.
Thank you so much. That's really great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we have a question from Regina. We can stay with who is willing to stay 10 more minutes, maybe. For all of those who have to leave us, thank you very much for your participation.
Good morning. Excuse me and apologies
Morning.
for not turning my camera on. I don't look my best. I have a bad cold today. I just wanted to say thank you for those presentations. They're really informative, and to Paula for her, and indeed Paula for your book. It's on my bedside locker. I'm reading a bit of it every night,
Thank
because
you.
I think this area is so important in preschool. I mean, if we look at how it progresses to the 14 and 16-year-olds, it needs to start at those early years. And I think that the willingness that you talk about, Paula, is something that needs to be developed. It's very difficult. I have 140 employees, and they're all at level 6, 7, and 8, and 9, working with us. And it is extremely difficult to provide the training afterwards, because there are so many legislative requirements on training that they need to do. For me, what you're doing is really important, because it makes the child's day so interesting, for in what they're doing. So it needs to absolutely be addressed in the training that's provided. More than a module, they need the work experience to be able to ingrain it in their practice on a daily basis. So I suppose from a worldwide thing, we're looking at how we integrate STEM and STEAM into preschool development for children and into the curriculum. That has to start there. It really needs to start there, so that they have an understanding when they come in to work in services, that this is part of the curriculum and needs to be embedded. Now, they do a lot of it, but they don't know, from the pedagogical side of things, it's already built in.
Yeah.
Some of it.
And I think that's so important as well, and why within the context of the Women in Digital group, what my focus is to try and shine that spotlight on the fact that the pathway needs to the STEM pathway needs to begin in the earliest years. Because I know, and like, say for example, the work Anastasia is doing is so fantastic with the age cohort of children, of young girls and young women. But they can make choices for themselves. Whereas in the early years, we need to focus on that the educator, bringing the STEAM, because they need to facilitate those opportunities for children. Because if they don't, then the children, whether they're girls or boys, don't have a choice whether they engage in STEM at all, unless we get the educator facilitating it in the environment. And thankfully, within the policy, within the European policy and within Irish national STEM education policy, we are seeing an acknowledgement that an early focus needs to happen. So that's where my work is dedicated to that area, and hopefully to be able to build that into the STEM pathway.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Regina.
Yes, Alessandra.
Hi, everybody. Many thanks for the excellent presentations, extremely stimulating and thought-provoking. I have few questions, and I would like to start addressing the famous issue of private sector, public sector involvement. So in your daily action or research, do you mainly focus on the private sector? I saw, if I remember correctly, an Anastasia presentation, a slide where you had plenty of different partners, I guess from the private sector. And how do you deal with the public sector involvement? And then when it comes to schools and the pedagogical approach, would you say, it's hard to say, but I mean, that there is a privileged approach for young children, for early age, to digital skills, something like Montessori? I have this in mind, where children are supposed to have really knowledge through their body or through their senses. So could you please have a say and enlighten a bit on these 2 points? Thanks a lot.
Yes, maybe Anastasia can take the first point and Paula the second.
Yeah, thank you, Alessandra. So from our experience, and I'm gonna be totally honest here, sometimes it's very difficult to collaborate with organizations, not because we don't want to or because they don't want to, but because mainly precisely because we want to keep all our activities free of charge for the girls, so that there is no financial barrier in their participation. We try to fundraise from private companies and also from public entities. It has been like a huge fight. The last 2 to 3 years, we've noticed that there is less and less sponsorships available for these kinds of programs that address the gender dimension, STEM dimension, and it's sometimes it can get a bit disheartening for us. Also from the public authorities, because you are right that it's challenging in Cyprus. I don't know how it is in other countries, but it can get a bit challenging in Cyprus. So yeah, it's kind of a challenge for us when it comes to fundraising, especially for this program, because we do have a lot of we do demand a lot of resources. For example, for the programs, it's a 2-day program. So we cover, for example, lunch, coffee breaks for the 2 days. We cover the trainers' fees for the coding. We cover any, materials and equipment, and so on and so forth. So yeah, we there is a lot of effort going on for that. I'm not sure if I answered your question though. I hope I did.
Yes, absolutely. And thanks. And somehow you do confirm my feeling, my understanding. Thanks.
Do you want me to quickly answer in terms of what your question about Montessori and sensory and resources and stuff like that?
Yes, if you
Yeah.
can, it will be
Yeah,
great.
so I suppose in terms of resources for ICT or digital resources or technological resources, I think in terms of the early childhood environment, whether it's Montessori or whether it's any other educational approach that an early childhood or preschool setting is utilizing, I think something that's a real focus of my work in both my book and in my research is that recognizing where the STEM and the STEAM and the digital opportunities for are already there. So, for example, maybe we're using a projector to project light and shadow onto the wall. Maybe we're using light boxes, calculators, digital cameras, little mini microscopes to explore, bugs or leaves. All of these are digital tools and technologies that can support, children's engagement with digital tools. But also, I think focusing on the when we talk about digital, thinking about digital competence as well. So for children to be digitally competent later in life. So, for example, to be able to engage as an active participant in a world where they may need to be able to navigate the online world or understanding AI and what's real and what's not real. Well, what skills can we and dispositions can we work on developing with children in early childhood? So, as part of when you break down digital competence, it's more than just the skill of being able to use a digital device correctly and appropriately. It's actually been able to think analytically about how you're using the device. Are you using it safely and in the right way? It's been able to problem solve. It's been able to think critically about what you're doing. So if we can focus on developing critical thinking, computational thinking, problem solving, children being analytical, being able to, communicate and not afraid to ask questions and to question things, well, that's supporting their digital competence. So I think it's breaking it down into things like digital and digital competence into its component parts and how we can bring that in through your sort of standard early childhood environment without worrying about the digital part as so when the word digital competence was originally coined, that phrase, it was around being competent to use digital tools, but the concept of digital competence has since been expanded to not only being able to use the tools, but being able to use them appropriately, safely, critically, and the problem solving and the analytical skills really feed into that. So, I think we need to focus on breaking down our preconceived ideas around what digital competence and what technology can mean to be able to make it relevant and meaningful to children in early childhood. And there are lots of different digital tools we can bring in and that we might even already have in our setting, like a digital camera or, the mini robotics kits like B-bots and things like that, but also in terms of STEM careers and role models, even bringing that in, do we bring that in our language? Do we say a policeman or a police officer? Do we say, a doctor or or do we say medical staff? Do we say fireman or firefighter? Are we thinking about gender bias in terms of the colours that we choose for dress up clothes for children to engage in role play? Do we provide a nurse's uniform with a skirt or do we provide medical scrubs? So we're breaking down preconceived and unconscious biases in terms of gender and STEM roles and STEM role models, beginning with children's play in early childhood. So there's lots and lots of things that we can do and that we probably are already doing and that align very well with any educational approach, whether it's Montessori or any other educational approach, I think. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, yes, deeply, extensively. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for all your questions and for your presentations. If there are no more questions, I think for me, one other main takeaway will be that leadership skills are exactly as important as hard skills. So let's not forget about how building soft skills in young girls can have even a longer impact than math and science and science skills. So thank you very much.